Good evening. My name is Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral, and we're glad to have you here on the Forum in San Francisco, California. Every year, the Cathedral chooses a theme for the year to help us figure out what our programs, what our focus is going to be. And this year, our theme is bridges, building bridges. How do we form connections with people that we may not know very much about? How can we bridge the gaps, the real or perceived gaps that divide us? For 3 weeks in the Forum, we've been talking about justice and the justice system from different perspectives. From Chesa Boudin, the District Attorney of San Francisco, Laura Bazelon, who's a professor and the author of Rectify, The Power of Restorative Justice After Wrongful Conviction. And tonight with Dorsey Nunn, Executive Director of Legal Services for Prisoners with Children and co-founder of All of Us or None. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Proposition 17, voting rights to parolees, and the movement to restore human and civil rights for formerly and currently incarcerated people. Dorsey, thank you so much for joining me tonight. We're so blessed to have you. And I know you're so busy, especially with the election coming up. I felt like we were really lucky to be able to squeeze this into your calendar.
I feel just honored to be able to talk to you and anybody else that would listen.
Yeah. There's so much going on, even as we prepare for the election in 1 week's time. It's hard to believe that we're finally there at that moment we've been waiting for so long. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just what your childhood was like. Just kind of what are those factors that turned you into who you ended up being as an adult? Like what were you interested in when you were a child? What kind of adults did you look up to? What was your life like?
Well, some of my earliest memories were moving down to Menlo Park. I went to a grade school. In fact, the grade school that sits around the corner, I still drive my car past it and rode my bike. And I can remember moving from Lindenville, that it was where Tanforan shopping center sits at.
Right.
In the 50s, and moving down to Menlo Park, and our welcome when we moved into Menlo Park was white flight. Everybody moved out the neighborhood probably within a year, all the whites in my neighborhood. And then my father kept following them around, and we went to East Palo Alto, and they moved out again. And essentially, I grew up in an era where in a county that appears to be, really, really welcoming to the outside. But my earlier memories is something different. And the reality of it is San Mateo County has probably elected one Black official in the history of the county since they've been part of the state. So like we could have all of those fuzzy feelings, but the real measurables is something different.
Right. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you about, is just what your experience of race was. Because I mean, now, of course, you understand the political system in a completely different way. But as a kid, just like how much of a sense did you have for that? Just that racism that was just kind of in the society all around you?
What really stands out is the struggle that we had around propositions like Proposition 187, when they started talking about what they were going to do with Latinos. And they kept talking about, borders. I had a border also, and it was Highway 101. Yeah. And what stayed on the other side of the bridge was perhaps all the whites, and the Blacks was marginalized in a small section in South San Mateo. Most of the things that I could remember experiencing, was having to go outside of my area to do, major shopping, or to go outside of my area to actually enjoy some of the advantages of staying in a really wealthy area. That wealth necessarily wasn't shared with us. So like when you think about the period of time that I grew up in, right now what exists there is Silicon Valley. I stayed probably a mile from Facebook, and I can remember my parents, one of the highlights of their life was probably buying a house in Menlo Park for probably less than $18,000. And it's unfortunate that they passed because the house is worth probably $1 million because Facebook moved in. And then suddenly the house, where all the whites left, now they're coming back
Right,
because
right.
of things. But it wasn't just Facebook, because I stayed in the shadows of the development of the transistor radio. That
Right.
also was generated a lot of wealth in the area, and that wealth wasn't necessarily equitably shared with the people who lived in the marginalized communities. The school that I went to was primarily Black when I went to it, and ultimately I didn't graduate from it and wind up going to prison. And when I got to prison, the thing that stood out the most was that prison had a color. And when I stepped in, I essentially seen more Black people locked up in prison, and I was around more Black people than I had been around any other place, including high school.
Yeah, I wonder if you can talk just a little bit about just your whole introduction to kind of to prison and what that was like. You were such a young man. I mean, it must have been scary and then formative too in terms of what kind of man you grew up to be.
It was it was extremely scary, you know, and I went from when I first walked in about maybe 140 pounds to recognizing that I needed to put on weight. So I went from 140 to probably 225. The first time they ever shaved was when I was in prison.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, had that experience of their father training them how to shave and doing all the rest of that stuff. And I went in when I was, I think I was arrested when I was 18 or 19, and I was in prison by the time I was 19. So I was walking into, I can remember the first guy that had an argument with inside of a prison was Juan Corona.
Oh, wow.
So,
Oh my
so it's like that's the environment I was in.
Yeah.
And the period of time that I was in prison was the most violent years in U.S. prison history.
Yeah. How did you survive that? And what kind of were people there to help you? I mean, like what kind of connections did you form with the people that you were meeting as you're coming of age in prison?
When I was coming of age in prison, there was also people that was there. I guess they changed my life in a way. It wasn't just, I can remember really learning how to read and learning how to reason when I was in prison. Because like the educational system, either I wasn't paying attention or it wasn't that good when I grew up. And in fact, I think white flight also took devastated not only the economic situation, it devastated the educational system inside of East Palo Alto and Menlo Park. We didn't invest in it in the same degree that we invested in surrounding areas. And when I got to prison, it was like learning how to read. And I can remember revolutionaries that were incarcerated with me because people that was there was from people like the Black Panther Party,
Right, of course.
Black Liberation Army, and a lot of those folks was there. And I couldn't wait. One of my milestones was learning how to read. And when I learned how to read, to be able to, because we had political education courses on the yard. And one of the privileges was that once you learned how to read, and they would tell what book did you read and what did you think. And I can remember standing up and discussing how much I disagreed with Eldridge Cleaver in regards to his writing of Soul on Ice.
Right.
I also read everything probably from Adam Smith to Fanon to Karl Marx, Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, Orson Welles. I read everything that I could. The side of the cereal box, what was on the back of the toilet paper roll. Just kept, I kept reading and I grew.
Did you read Diary of Malcolm X? The
second book they gave me.
Yeah.
The autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And it was gave to me by a revolutionary by the name of Anthony Bottom, who y'all know as Jaleel. And when I got there in 1972, they transferred him. And I can remember like he had been giving me books, but I didn't ever know who he was until I was looking at the news.
Right.
And I seen him close down one of the wings of the airport to transport him to New York. So it's like, that was my experience. I also served time with Geronimo and a number of other people. So it's like, and a lot of them I actually looked up, and some of the elders that was there extracted a promise, probably in the later parts of my prison life, to return back to the community an asset instead of a liability. I grew up in the shadow of Stanford. And when it was named the murder capital, I grew up in the shadow of Stanford, and I was raised a long period of time in East Palo Alto. And it was named the murder capital of the United States, and I won the Wellness Award for being a California Peace Fellow.
Yeah, I know you've had such incredible accomplishments. I mean, it's hard to take such a tough childhood and be able to turn it into something that can help so many people. You know, when you were in prison, did you have a sense for? I mean, you knew that you wanted to make a difference, but did you know kind of what area you'd make a difference in? Did you have a sense for where you were going?
God, that's a real difficult question. The difficult question is I knew where I wanted to go. I didn't know how I was going to get there. Because, you know, a lot of people were returning, and thank God that some of them gave me, the people who failed to make parole, they still was bringing information back. Yeah. And, you know, so they brought, you know, pertinent information back. Dorsey, don't go out, you know, because I started asking them, man, why are y'all returning? I can't get out and y'all keep coming back. So, you know, right, and it was completely. Like, you know, and it was in the middle of a heroin epidemic. And they probably treated Black people different than they treated the current opioid addicted people because they decided to make it a medical issue as opposed to a criminal justice issue where they were punishing people. But when it was actually something that they just thought poor Black people did, they really, 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 really did punish people. And it's probably the same thing that my brother went to prison for probably less than 2 joints of weed until the hippie movement started, and then it became, we need to do something different. And I think that race has a significant part of how we process the issue of justice in this country.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what got you through it too. I mean, it's just, there must have been a huge temptation just to be totally depressed and to be in despair. Like what kind of inner resources did you have to help you make it through this tough time in your life?
I promised to my daughter that I'd be home for her wedding.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, that was one of the things that got me there. And you know, because at times she would come up, and and when I grew old enough for him to send me to San Quentin, when they sent me to San Quentin, I used to lie to my daughter about where I was until she could learn how to read, and then she started extracting promises. And you know, at first I'm shackled down with chains, waist chains, telling her I'm back in there with Disneyland, and I'm back there with Mickey Mouse and da da da. Yeah. And then one day she challenged me after she learned how to read, and her mother probably did me a real good one, because she made me believe that I was going to be responsible for my daughter. So that was one of the things, you know. But then again, you know, we hear stories when we in prison, and my mother was a founder of a church, and she just didn't know how to tell the story the same way the guys told the stories. Yeah. So like, you know, sometimes they wouldn't allow us books, so they told us about how about this? You know him as Jesus. In prison, they was talking to him like he was a Jerusalem Slim. And he would, then dawned on me one day, oh man, that's what my mama was talking.
Yeah, exactly. Same person.
Same person, right? So it was like, he stopped this independent thinking woman from being stoned. Homeboy was really down for us. They drug him from the cell and nailed him to a cross, and he carried it up to the top of the mountain. And there, the last people he hung out with was between 2 thieves. So they would be telling you the story, and we'd be in the hole getting tear gas, and they'd be talking. So I had a lot of different inspirations. So it wasn't just Karl Marx; it was that we talked about everything.
Yeah. Oh,
and on the last part of when I was getting ready to go home, one of my friends asked me, what was I going to do with my newfound freedom? And any answer would have did. I could have told him because all the way up to them, I thought, what I really want to do immediately was the taste of Henry Weinhardt beer.
Right. I can imagine that.
I was 19. I had never bought a legal beer.
Right.
I wanted the commercial had got me. I wanted a Henry Weinhardt beer.
Yeah.
I wanted to have wild kinky sex. It was a whole bunch of stuff that was going on. And I thought that the question that he asked me was extremely serious.
Yeah.
And he showed up at my office when I was the executive director, probably 40 years after I got out, or something like that, 30-something years after I got out. And I remembered the question that he asked me.
Yeah.
And what I was able to do was give him an answer. I said, the question that you asked me, I didn't give you an answer. And he didn't even remember the question.
Yeah.
And what I actually told him was, my answer to your question is that I would spend the rest of my life fighting for your rights.
Right.
Because I had the privilege of getting out when many of y'all were never going to be released or were going to be released, and you couldn't put in what I put in. Yeah. So it was a number of gates that I've walked through. I walked through both the gates of San Quentin upon my release. I also walked through the gates of the White House.
Right.
So along the way, and both of those experiences was similar in a way that when I got between gates, because they had two gates that you go between, one would open and let you in,
close.
and the other one close in front of you, and they contain you in this area. And I can remember being with 8 of the guys that had been to prison from around the country going into the White House, and it was the same setup. And we was all looking at each other asking, well, who's going to go in there first? Last time was 2 gates. It didn't work out that well for us, But, the thing that, I got out and I was lucky, but the luck wasn't only mine. Because like in the community I grew up in East Palo Alto, I also helped build and co-found one of the largest drug programs in East Palo Alto called Free at Last. I'm also the executive director of legal services for prisoners with children, and I didn't help purchase a half a block for my organization. The proceeds that we charge for rent for the people who rent here, we just got finished pumping the money that we collected over the course of since 2018 into helping fight for the full restoration of our rights in relationship to voting. With Proposition 17. The parts that, if it's anything I want to convey to other people that could be listening that I can't see, and it's nice talking to you, but some of the stuff that I get a chance to live and do, I don't think that they even know my worth. Because you can't lock up 2 million people without locking up brilliance and genius.
Right, exactly.
And in the country, we got over 2 million people locked up. So it's brilliance and genius in there, and remorseful people also. So they don't know that. Just in this election, because stuff that I didn't learn in prison was I came from the streets, so voting wasn't that good. But this election, I just got finished, like I said, talking to a group of people, and probably if Proposition 17 passed, organizations led by formerly incarcerated people will have changed the constitutions in 3 states over the course of the last 4 years. In 2015, I want to help win a lawsuit when the Secretary of State stopped appealing, and we already had secured 60,000 votes for people who were in the county jail. This time around, we're going to actually probably wind up securing another 50,000. But the voting in itself is great. The other thing that's happening is that it's a segment of the community that people don't necessarily recognize is getting all of these skills. So over the course of the last 2 months, we have text message over 250,000 people. We have phone called close to 50,000 people. We have radio ads running on 5 stations 3 times a day. We have taken out impressions on Spotify and Pandora. We are using LinkedIn, and we will have been in touch over 2 million people in the state of California over the course of the last 90 days.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you probably can't say any particular segment of the Black and brown community that actually can say what I just said to you. So we could be the cutting edge of a lot of work, regardless of what people think about us, whether they forgive us or not forgive us. The thing that we're going to say is that some of us got out and we living up to the promise that we're going to be an asset instead of a liability.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's miraculous. I mean, it's an amazing thing because I have a friend of mine he and I are pretty much the same age. And when I turned 18, I went to college. When he went to 18, he went to prison, and he didn't get out until he was 30. And it was really hard for him coming out and having formed, all his adult life habits were around prison habits. And it was really hard to learn how to live in outside of prison. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, just because, I mean, it's like the success part of it we see, but how did you get to that? And how did it start? What was the first thing that you started doing on behalf of prisoners after you got out?
I walked probably less than 100 yards and got a job at the prison law office, where I started to sue California Department of Corrections based on what my experiences were. And based on the inequities I seen inside the system. And I didn't start off as the executive director of a public interest law office.
Right.
I started off raking leaves in front of a law office. So it's not like I got here that way, but for the first 6 years that I was out, I worked less than 100 yards from the gates that I walked through, fighting for people's rights. I spent 3 years, regrettably, being an addict, a practicing addict.
Right.
And probably my amends to my community and my amends to the people that I left behind was that I built the drug program. Right. Because, I felt that I should have been actually introduced to something other than punishment. And I wanted my homies to have access to treatment as opposed to incarceration. And I didn't figure like anybody else was going to do it unless some of us got together and actually done it. The work that when I came home, I went to enrolled in Cal State Hayward. And I went to college there, and surprisingly enough, I didn't know much about college. So, I majored in criminal justice. Everybody else in there was the police and probation officers and stuff like that. And I was there to learn how to dismantle a system. And I didn't last that.
I mean, that's brilliant too. I mean, that's a great way, because that's a totally different experience. You just, and to have an academic background in the criminal justice system, of course, that's going to make you much more powerful in your advocacy today. That's a really important part of your story.
Yeah, I went from the 6th grade in terms of reading when I was in there to acquiring an associate arts degree before I got out. And so it was like education was important. But the same thing that happened, and it was strange, it was that I was like, while I was encaged, my education broadened and it made the world so much broader. So it's not like, I didn't learn how to dream these large dreams, and I learned how to read in part because I wanted to write a love letter that was, other than I love you, do you love me? I wanted something more sophisticated than that, hoping that I would get another chance at life with the person that I was infatuated with at the point. And the other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to read and see who didn't have extradition treaties with the United States, just in the event that I was able to manage my escape, which I never did try and I never did do. But the other reality of it is that in my head, I did escape. And in reality, the places that I dreamed about going when I was in prison that I ultimately went to. So like I went to and seeing what the prisons look like in
I wanted to ask you about that because I saw the different places that you visited in terms, and you're going to know more about the criminal justice system as a former prisoner, but also through your education. But what is the difference between the prisons in South Africa or Korea or here or other places you visited, and what do prisons tell you about the society in which they exist?
I can remember being in El Salvador and having a person named I think Anidia Diaz asked me the question was, should they let private prisons in? And I thought about it a lot. And I said, not unless you want to reinvent slavery.
Yeah.
So right now I'm fighting for Proposition 17. I can tell you that if God blessed me enough to live a couple more years, I'm going to fight to remove the use of involuntary servitude out the California Constitution, because we shouldn't necessarily maintain vestiges of slavery.
Yeah.
So I'm going to change the Constitution, because I know what it's like to not only be a prisoner, but to be enslaved while you're that, and nobody recognized that you're being forced at gunpoint to have labor extracted from you.
And the other thing you point out too is that it creates like a really bad incentive for having large prison populations, because people benefit financially from having that free labor. So I mean,
not only if you base labor on that particular assumption, what would make people want to get out and have a job if they think that that's what labor is about?
Yeah, that's true too. So exactly. So it's like you're not preparing people for their future by doing that.
One of the things that I had the privilege of doing was help initiating the campaign in California called Ban the Box.
Right.
Because like when I got out and I ran into structural discrimination, because at first they kept telling us that we were lazy, but they didn't see, I guess because they hadn't been to prison, they didn't see the question on all the application acts, have you been convicted of a felony, which is structural in nature. Like I said, when my homeboy came home, after all that time, after he learned how to catch Bart, he came over to visit me. And the day that he came over to visit me, we looking at my computer, and what we were hearing was the president of the United States saying we should follow the lead of counties and states and ban the box. And I looked to him and says, what he just uttered is something that I taught him how to say. Right. When you talk about the prison industrial complex, me and Angela Davis taught most of the world and probably this country on how to say it. So at a certain things, I didn't introduce terms into public speak, and most people don't know me when they pass me. And they're less afraid of me because I didn't got old. So it's like some parts of what I get a chance to do is right now, I'm fighting to secure the rights to vote to 50,000 people. When I was fighting for Ban the Box, what I was trying to do was gain access to medical care for the children who came from me, because I thought that people in my community should have had the right to be treated at Stanford, or should have the right to be treated at Kaiser. And it wasn't simply me needing a job and to feed myself. One of the things that was inspirational to me staying the course wasn't just the people I left behind, but when I came home, I recognized that probably on the first day when I found my son, because I had 2 children by the age of 17. When I left, my son was barely walking. And when I came home, he didn't know me. And I walked around San Francisco for 2 days until I confined my son. So it wasn't like all the stuff that I thought about when they popped the gates. I didn't go look for the vets, that vet card that I wanted. I didn't do the Winchell's donut. I didn't do the Henry Weinhardt. I went to find my kids. And that was really important. And when I did find my kids, what I recognized was that the punishment wasn't only mine, it was theirs. And it was transferred to them very much how we transferred debt to indentured servants when they came over from Europe. So it wasn't like if your daddy went in debt, it was just his debt. If he died before he paid it, it became your debt. When I came home, I seen that the punishments that had visited me didn't simply visit me; it visited my children.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to know too about that. How did legal services for prisoners with children? I just how did that organization come out of that experience? I can imagine you just like walking through the streets of San Francisco, finding your kids, and then how did you help other prisoners to mend and heal in their family lives? I didn't start legal services for prisoners with children. I'm the current executive director. Who started it was a person by the name of Ellen Berry, who's like smaller than I am, but she wanted to make Arthur Genius Award to show you that she's really smart. She is smart.
I was interviewing her on a radio station because I had one night a week, one night a month, I would be on the K-Pool, and I was interviewing her. Being that I didn't want anything from her as a woman, other than the interviewer, I was really listening. And then when I was listening, out of this little short white woman came all the stuff that I heard about that other women had told me along the way of being an addict and all the rest of that stuff. But being that I didn't have any investments that way, it wasn't, yeah, give me what I want. It was, let me really listen. I was listening to her. And when I thought that I knew everything, I didn't know as much as I thought, because I didn't know about women in prison. And when I had worked at the prison law office, what their primary concerns was that guys, it was conditions of confinement and collateral attacks upon their convictions. The first thing that came up for women was, what do they do with children?
Right.
And I ultimately went to work for Ellen. And in fact, one of the things that and what I'm saying, the naivety was like tremendous, because when she said OBGYN, I thought it was a prison gang like the BGF or the Mexican Mafia.
Right.
I didn't have a framework, and I thought that I was a really knowledgeable person about prison. And that may have been the case, but I wasn't a knowledgeable person about women in prison.
Right.
And that was a whole different, took me down a different slant. And I figured, like, well, if I start working at prison again, I won't necessarily get so depressed that I get loaded, because I knew so many people in prison when I started going back in, because within the first, at the 2 years I was going back in, and part of my job was to be in prison 20 hours a week, providing services to guys in prison, which was much too soon, because they thought I just had got off the hole. But but when I figured, like, if I visited women, I wouldn't necessarily have that connection. And on the first visit, I walked in, and three women said, "Hey, Dorsey, we ain't seen you in a long time." And I felt so guilty because I hadn't thought about what was the conditions of women in prison, and even more importantly, what was the impact of women in prison on the community, because we had already had a history of them snatching up and imprisoning Black men. The drug wars also included the gathering of Black bodies and putting them in cages in a real serious way. And so, some of the things that I had worked on at the prison law office, I got to do again, and work on suits like suing the California Department of Correction for inadequate medical care for women prisoners. And in fact, the place that I work now, Legal Services for Prisons for Children, which I am the executive director, more than 50% of my staff are formerly incarcerated. So it's not like I just talk about giving that people should have the opportunity to work. I actually give them jobs. When we bought the building, what we're building is our sanctuary. So when they come in, if somebody's angry, as long as you're not getting violent, you can walk through the door and be angry and not have your parole violated. In the event that you need to curse somebody out, if you're not putting your hands on them, you can do that also. So it's like there's a whole bunch of things that was available that I thought was unavailable to me, because being that I didn't necessarily have any ways of expressing myself when I first came home. When I had got into 3 fights, it was the third fight before I figured out that it wasn't them and it was me. And I was on the bus getting ready to get into that 4th fight. Then I discovered that I could pull that little chain and the bus would stop and I could get off. So when that person was screaming at me, I was doing a happy dance. go fool. So it's like, in the midst of these experiences, and sometimes, even your anger can drive certain things. So my anger, in a way, I was angry in the county jail when I was an addict and I was getting ready to get into a fight. And then I figured, like, if I get drunk in this county jail, me and this guy is going to give in a fight. I never, ever drank again. It was like it was a revelation in a way that, my personality changed when I used. Me and my daughter was having, when I came into, my recovery, I was sitting at something called Heidi Pies. And she told me, "Dad, I'm going to have to move if you fire up the cigarette." And I never smoked again, because I figured like I had wasted enough time from my only daughter. It was like, I wasted, no, this is like, I saved a whole bunch of money and bought a car from what I saved.
That's
also.
good.
But like the part that I think that's invaluable, particularly to Black and brown communities, is in the event that I figured out and build something that can actually text message 250,000 people in a few months, phone call 50,000 people, run ads on 5 radio stations 3 times a day, and pay for the ads out of the building that we done bought with the rent that we charge in order to help secure the full restoration of our voting rights.
Yeah. Is Proposition 17, what are the prospects for it? I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit about what the proposition is and just, what do you think in terms of the likelihood of it passing?
I think that we're going to win. And if Black lives really matter, we will win.
Yeah.
And I think that I've already won, because what I did was train a whole bunch of formerly incarcerated people of how to fight for their civil and their human rights, no matter what happens with the proposition.
Right.
Like I'm 68 years old, and what I'm already training is my replacements.
Right.
So there's a protracted struggle, and they will know how to do a proposition work. They will know how to actually take it through the legislature. They will know how to actually lobby in Sacramento. They will actually know how to place something on the ballot. They will know how to buy commercials, how to hire PR firms. They will know how to take out radio ads. They will know how to do hustle, which is the text messaging thing. Yeah. They will know how to do phone banking. They will know how to actually sign the front of the check instead of the back of the check. They will know a whole bunch of different stuff.
Right.
So it's like, I don't think at this point there's nothing that could happen where I've lost.
Yeah, I like that. This is like one step in a much longer journey, and we should do the best we can on this step, but it's not the whole thing. That there's other good blessings that are coming out of this.
We took 1,000 people and we went into Florida in 2016 and helped pass Amendment 4. And what you're possibly looking at is a victory in Florida also. If we win in Florida, it will change the political landscape of the country.
Yep. Exactly.
So you don't know me, but a lot of people, they probably should get to know us, because what could be happening is probably an explanation why they actually decide to practice mass incarceration. And if more of us was released, we would change the political landscape in which everybody else exists.
Yeah, exactly. And what a gift that would be to end in mass incarceration and change society in a profound way.
If you think about what it meant for somebody like me who had the right to vote and all my comrades did not in 2000 when you had Gore and Bush.
Yeah.
And those people who couldn't vote, they sacrificed the treasures of the country as well as our children to war.
Yeah.
We didn't have a say so.
No.
And people who are so unforgiving for people who live here, we was able to forgive the people who fought us in the Vietnam War, World War II, the Russians and everybody else, but we can't forgive Pookie.
Yeah,
what does that say about your forgiveness level?
Yeah.
So it's like, so it's all of that stuff that runs through my intellect in terms of what I'm thinking about. And in terms of when everybody was wondering if Abramson won, there was 1,000 people who went down to Florida a week before the election when he was passing Amendment 4 in Florida, that we had worked on that campaign. And when everybody else was seeing if there was going to be a Black elected official, all the rest of us was seeing was there going to be more rights for us to actually participate.
Right. Right.
And the things that we learned in Florida, we came back to California. And so like we learned how to actually call all of those peoples. We learned how to actually text message all those peoples because somebody in Florida taught us how to do that. And we taught that to 1,000 other people that's around the country.
Yeah, so, there's like the basic building blocks of how to be politically active. I've been thinking a lot about San Quentin these last 6 months, just with COVID and all the things going on there. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just what's going on with COVID and how it's affecting prisoners' lives, and just help us to understand that a little bit better.
All right, like the first thing that when COVID hit, and they knew that, COVID hit at Santa Rita. That's my first involvement.
Yeah.
And when it hit at Santa Rita, they did emergency relief. And we were saving money to buy an apartment building so we can have more stable housing. And we took our unrestricted funds and we put 50 people up at the Comfort Inn in Oakland.
Oh, yeah.
Gave them a 30-day stay because what we wanted to do was protect them, protect the community and protect the people getting out of prison, out of Santa Rita jail, because they were being released from an environment that had COVID-19 in it, and they were coming into an environment that had COVID-19 in it. Mm. And we figured like what we wanted to do was give them a break. We gave out $100 gift cards to our family members and our friends because we were on the front lines and we probably weren't going to work. So we passed out probably $370, $100 gift cards to people either coming home or their family members because people needed to eat. We wrote a book around what people should be doing at San Quentin and other prisons that were elder prisoners that was facing probably the spread of the pandemic inside their institution, about what they should be doing to identify themselves. So in the event that there was relief, that they would at least know how to file an appeal and get their names on the list. And being that I'm the executive director of legal services for prisoners with children, I had an attorney write that manual and actually start sending it in to people who was there. I've also had, being that I'm the executive director of legal services for prisoners with children, I also was part of, my organization was part of suing the state of California to end long-term solitary confinement because they have been locking my friends up for 20 and 30 years in solitary. Yeah. So it's like I got to make a whole bunch of choices about how do I engage the system in a productive way, which, probably when I was younger, I was trying to do it, but I didn't have skills to wear, and I wasn't necessarily that successful or that productive.
Yeah, and like you say, there are basic things you need to learn and know about in order to be able to be effective. One of our traditions that we have on the show is that we take questions from our audience, and so I'm just inviting everybody to make their questions and send them on through Rebecca to me. The Black Lives Movement, there's been so much change. There's so much that's going on. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about Black Lives Movement and just kind of where things are going and where things are right now. Just seems like there's so much change happening all around. And I wonder
my work is like, here's an example. After they killed George Floyd, I can tell you what I was doing on July the 1st. Yeah. Because what I had my staff do, they did the research and found 600 victims of police homicides that happened over the course of the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And we got their pictures and we blew them up to 2 by 3 feet. And then what we did on July the 1st was took them to the state capitol and laid them down on the state capitol. Wow. So they had stopped telling us it's only a few bad apples when we're being killed on a regular basis and nobody care.
Yeah.
Those same pictures, I only had the intentions of doing it one time, and it cost us thousands of dollars to reproduce those images. And then what we did was that we helped bring family members in, because the only people they say their names, the only ones we hear is the famous ones. And if we was to actually say the names of everybody that was being killed by the police, we'd be there for days,
Right.
So yeah. You couldn't say everybody's names, but I want to give family members a chance to actually show up and be able to say the name to their loved one and speak to somebody who really cared. The day after they decided not to prosecute anybody for killing Breonna, we had, because we gave all the family members that showed up, we gave 100 of those pictures away. So we had about 507 pictures that were still there. The day after they didn't charge anybody for Breonna, we went out and laid those pictures on the steps of Oakland City Hall so people can once again bear witness to the homicides of what was happening. And I was able to stand up along with me and my friends and says, these 500 people, nobody was prosecuted for their homicides either. So, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, when it comes to Black and brown folks, we having some real conversations, at least brown folks around us. So we can tell them, why do Black Lives matter? Well, one of the reasons it should matter to a brown person that's an immigrant here was the whole notion of birthrights in this country stems from a question that came from slavery. So my Black lives should matter because it will determine the rights of your children. When it comes to the advancement of voting rights in this country, Black lives should be matter because Black people made that matter. So you have all of these things when it came to affirmative action, which really served women really well. It was actually a struggle initially predicated on the advances of Black people. So like when we say Black Lives Matter, sometimes I ask, what do you mean by it? Because it always mattered. People just didn't recognize that they should respect our lives. So I guess that's a complicated answer.
No, it's a complicated thing too. It's hard to see what the future is going to be. And I think part of it is just the election is looming so big on everybody's mind. It's almost hard for us to think past a week from now. And that's why, I wonder if you can talk too, just about other initiatives on the ballot besides Proposition 17 that you think we should know about, or
how about Proposition 16? You should know about Proposition 16 that helped reinstate some of the losses that we suffered as a result of the Bakke decision at UC Berkeley. How about Proposition, I think it's 14 or 15 that may establish the rights of people 17 years to vote in the primaries. How about Proposition 15? It's really a terrible thing that they didn't teach me how to read earlier, because we could have got at some of this stuff.
Made an earlier start.
President learn how to read.
Yeah, I tell you.
Your educational system in my neighborhood really did suck.
Yeah.
We can talk about Proposition 25, and I think you can fall anyway on that question about Proposition 25 because they talked about the races. I think they called it algorithms in terms of the classification system, or whether or not you should be released or not be released, around the question of money bail. We could talk about the question about should we have the right to expect rent control in an era when we actually excuse so many corporations who buys property that don't pay their fair share. So our schools would always remain poor and always remain underfunded, and our neighborhoods were underfunded. We could talk about Proposition 17 that actually helps divest ourselves from the vestiges of slavery, because when it came down to whether or not we got a right to vote, it had more to do with what happened after Reconstruction, because immediately after Reconstruction, Southern white Democrats started figuring out how do they disempower the Black people who had the right to vote. So what do you want to talk about in this election? And at the same time, what do we need to really talk about? Because I need to tell everybody, I never was the smartest guy in any prison that I was in. So who do y'all think y'all holding? It ain't just a matter of your public safety. It's a matter of possibly the notion that your political reality could change, because you will have people fighting for rights that normally have been remaining dormant. Yeah. So I'm probably a part of the giant that's in your living room, and you didn't recognize that they had released me.
Yeah. It's interesting too. You've been so involved in just on voter suppression things, just different voter suppression efforts in different places. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. Just it just doesn't seem like, it seems like there's so many examples of voter suppression in so many different places. All right,
here's a tidbit. In 2016, there was 3 things that we won that was meaningful to my community. In Florida, we won the right to vote, and that was for 1.4 million people. That could change the landscape for this election.
Yeah.
right? In Louisiana, we won the right to have a unanimous jury because they were trying people and you only needed 10 people to come up with a decision in criminal cases. And in 2016, it was Amendment 2 in Louisiana. The one that squeaked by that I wasn't watching, which really was surprising to me because I thought that I was watching everything. I'm a news junkie. Was the stuff that came out in Colorado.
Oh.
What Colorado did was that they removed the use of the term slavery and involuntary servitude out the out of the Colorado Constitution.
Right,
Those was the three things. And when we was looking at that and that one came, our head spin. So like a lot of people ask me questions, am I a good citizen? And my answer is probably a real complicated answer. Because as long as we don't have the ability to vote any place in this country, I don't actually know if I'm a citizen. And I seen people that was indicted for voting in North Carolina. I read indictments where they charged people for voting for Barack Obama, and they charged them. And within the charging documents, they stated that they voted without reestablishing citizenship and the rights to suffrage. Wow. So it's like, I don't even believe that half of the people that I'm probably talking to now have any idea what it looks like when somebody's charged with a voting crime. And by the way, I've been to jail with a lot of people and been to prison with even more. And at no point did I ever see anybody that stole a vote.
Right.
They stole, I've seen people that stole planes, they just stole cows, they just stole the train, they just stole stuff out your house. Never one person that I meet in my whole history that said, man, I was guilty of stealing some votes, man. I ain't bet that, and probably those people don't go to jail, because they weren't in any of the prisons or jails that I was in. So even what Donald Trump is saying, for all of us that been to jail and prison, we saying, what? Did you meet anybody who that was their get down? That's what they were in prison for? And we said, no, we ain't met those people. Where are they at? So I assume that they're occupying the White House and other high seats.
Right. That's where they are. Children in public schools who have parents in prison. What is done for them? How are they supported? I've gone to prison and to visit friends and seen kids who are there to see their parents. What do kids in that situation need, and how are you helping them?
One of the things I did, when I was coming up, I stole some bicycles from Stanford. I used to go Christmas shopping there, stealing people bicycles.
Not at Stanford Mall.
Not Stanford Mall, Stanford College.
Oh yeah.
And I could say that probably every year for the last 20 years, we've been giving away 100 bikes in the middle of Menlo Park to children whose parents are incarcerated. The initial effort came from people that was in prison that said, what we want to do is give some bicycles to kids because we don't think that they should necessarily have to bear the burden that we had to bear when we were younger. So we started giving away bicycles. And being that I'm an old guy, it wasn't until probably on maybe the 5th bicycle giveaway during the holiday season, because we don't call it celebrating Christmas. We call it the holiday season because we got other religious peoples that's also
right, of course,
in this effort. And it wasn't me and somebody standing up there. And we the kids was getting brand new bicycles and they kept falling over. And somebody asked me, you think that we can love them enough to give them a helmet? Because we didn't have helmets when we came up.
Right,
we just old people think about, they'll fall down a couple times and get up and they'll learn how to ride the bicycle. Somebody said, suppose they bust their brains out. Then we learned an important market strategy that when you're asking somebody for something, don't ever put in the middle of your sentence and. So if you ask them for a bike, don't say, can you buy a bike and a helmet? So you ask them for a sum of money to keep from asking them for the and, because the and would, they hesitate on the and. So if you ask them for two things, you're less likely to get either thing. If you ask them, so it was things that, that we were learning because I can actually say that the prison teaches a whole bunch of skills that are ultimately developed. And that came more from people who cared about me. One thing I need to say, that I want to say, what stopped me from being angry was other people loving me more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing that we should tell people. And sometimes you grow into a state of consciousness that come as a result of people loving you more. And probably a while back ago, I wrote my amends letter to the person who died in the liquor store that I participated in that robbery, and somebody else killed the guy, but I was equally guilty because I was there. And when I wrote the letter, what had happened was that it was my grandchildren. It was rocking my grandchildren and rocking my children that I recognized that the person who died in that story never had a chance to rock their grandchildren. And the children that he had never had a chance to depend on their father. And I may feel one way about the system, but I could feel a totally different way about victims' rights, because I thought most people that I met in prison was also victims too.
Yeah.
That's, what I feel like I need to share that with people who could be looking at this and listening.
Yeah, because every person who's listening to this has a chance to love someone in that way that can be part of their true freedom.
Yeah. Like I'm in when I told you I got into that third fight.
Right,
I was on the verge, that on the verge of that fourth fight. I went to a person who I trusted to help me get out of prison, and who was also running the prison law office. And I told him, I said, man, I'm exploding,
Yeah.
And I recognized that in prison that they had destroyed my sense of flight. It was always,
right. The only thing you can do is you have to face that problem because there's nowhere you can get away from it.
There's no back door to the cells.
No back door. Back door to the cells.
Did you? Else I probably would have took the back door earlier, But
really.
And he was young at the time that he came to visit me as an attorney when I was in prison.
Yeah.
And right, because I'm in the process of writing a book right now also. I let him read, my sketch of what I wanted to write about, and he read it. And I was trying to get a book deal with, I think it was a New Press, and they didn't ultimately accept it. But I was telling them they may not accept it because, like, people tell you yes real fast. They slow to tell you no because they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
So I says, I suspect that I got a no coming because of the length of time between what I was submitted and what was there for me. So he told me, Dorsey, no matter what, man, you need to write this book.
Yeah.
And he was a person that not only helped me get out several weeks early, he trusted me enough to give me the key to his house. And he trusted me enough that after he had his first child, that I was outside of his wife held the baby, he held the baby. Then the next person that showed up to hold his daughter was me.
Yeah,
and he gave me, and I like, baby was really smart. I thought I was going to break the baby. I don't want like I broke your baby, dog.
Yeah, I still worry about that sometimes.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a worry. But God is good. And one of the things that happened was when a New Press turned me down, what he did, I said, Dorsey, I want to introduce you to the baby that you held, my daughter. And she's a publisher for Heyday Press, who decided to give me a contract to write a book.
Oh, that's great.
So sometimes, you never know what comes at you and where they come from, because what if it's anything I'm trying to convey in talking to you is if you could have all of these jewels that's in cages, and if you just throw them away, it will be everybody's loss.
Yeah.
Not just the people in prison.
Oh, you're so right.
it would be the prison and the people in society also.
Yeah.
Because nobody never ever thought that I would win the Wellness Award when East Palo Alto was named the murder capital of the United States, and I would be out there trying to stop the violence. Nobody thought when they had a epidemic of people using crack cocaine, it would be me and a bunch of formerly incarcerated people that would be stepping in the gap and trying to stop the drug use by building the drug program.
Yeah.
They never seen us.
No.
And so it's like sometimes, they just write us off because either they're angry or injured. And one of the things that I recognized that the tragic night that a person lost his life, I felt entitled and I felt angry. And that right there is probably a real bad mix. But I think that other people are probably angry and they feel entitled and they feel privileged and they may not be able to actually get to those issues. So they would prefer to deny people basic human decency and rights. Not to give me a job at certain points meant that my kids didn't have medical coverage. Not to give me a job at a certain point meant that I didn't close them into the best of my abilities.
Yeah.
So I've talked a great deal of time, and I like talking to you. Got any more questions?
Oh, I know. Unfortunately, we always stick to our schedule, and we're over schedule. Dorsey, with that, whoever that person was who asked you if you were a good citizen, you're like a better citizen than the next 1,000 people after you. Like you do. We're so grateful for your ministry out there because this is so important. Because we're never going to live in a just society as long as we have 2 million people locked up in prison, and you do give us a sign of hope that something can be done about it. So thank you very much for being our guest. Next week, we're having Alan Jones, the former dean, the dean emeritus, is going to be the guest at the forum. He's the person who started the forum 25 years ago. And you can help bring the arts at Grace alive with a gift to the forum. Please visit gracecathedral.org/give to Grace. And Dorsey Nunn, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for having me, and I hope I didn't bore people.
No, not at all. Those stories are going to be with all of us for the whole week. You're giving us hope for the future, and gosh, I'm very grateful for your ministry out there.
All right, thank you a lot.
All right, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week.